Hey everybody, and welcome to a new edition of MazzaOnMets. It's Evan Mazza here. We're talking all things New York Mets baseball. And this week, if you were a fan of the Mets on the field, there wasn't much to write home about in terms of the Mets on the field. Off the field, there was a lot of things to talk about with the New York Mets as the trade deadline has come and gone. The trade deadline has he traded the trade deadline. From Thursday at 6 p.m. The New York Mets were one of the more active teams in all of Major League Baseball. Them and the Yankees and the Padres and Mariners and so on and so forth. There was a lot of activity in terms of especially bullpen, and the Mets were certainly head and shoulders right there when it comes to getting relievers. So on the field, not much to write home about as the New York Mets got swept by the San Diego Padres this week. And yeah, that's a way to completely kind of dampen the West Coast road trip and dampen the 7 game winning streak that they had, getting swept by the San Diego Padres. But off the field and the moves and trying to improve the baseball team, I think the Mets did a pretty solid job. I think David Stearns did a pretty solid job. I would have liked to have seen a starting pitcher, but with the moves they made, I think they did a pretty good job. Now we'll see what the results will be starting on Friday when they play the San Francisco Giants. Anyway, to get to on the field, the New York Mets, of course, were on the road against San Diego Padres. They're the last 3 games of this 6 game West Coast road trip after just completing a sweep of the San Francisco Giants. And they got off to a good start on Monday night with like Mark Vientos really had a really nice day. He had a hit. Should have had a 2-run homer that was robbed by Fernando Tatis. He hits a grand slam. It's 5-1, New York Mets. And then that's when the wheels fell off. Mark Vientos hits the grand slam, and then Frankie Montas in the bottom of the fifth just wasn't able to get an out. I think he only got 1 out on 4 hits. Gives up a run, but then Huascar Brazoban comes in and really struggles. Couldn't find the strike zone. Gave up the lead. Uh, and he made the mistake. Some fundamental mistakes by the Mets in this series in this game that really hurt them with Brazo and overall in the series, but that really hurt them in this game with Brazoban on a ground ball that Pete Alonso made a great play on. The game had become 5-4, and right there, Alonso makes a great play, which should have ended the inning. And instead, Brazoban didn't get off the mound. Again, these are kind of mistakes that struggling pitchers make, but also mistakes made that have been very all around Major League Baseball. And this wouldn't be the only mistake that a relief pitcher made for the Mets. Brazoban doesn't get off the mound in time. He kind of hesitated a bit, didn't get off the mound, didn't rush to first base, excuse me, off the mound, and the runner was safe, and the Padres tied the game. So again, just part of the and it would happen again with Gregory Soto later on in the game, but a 5-1 lead for the New York Mets all of a sudden, becomes all of a sudden the Padres not only tie the game but take the lead with a big inning in the bottom of the fifth. And we've seen this with the Mets over the course of this season. The games get away from them with 1 inning. So in the bottom of the fifth, the Padres scored 5 runs to take the lead. To summarize the full inning here in the bottom of the fifth, uh, to summarize the whole thing, Frankie Montas gives up a double to Fernando Tatis, a 2-run homer to Luis Arias, Manny Machado base hit, Xander Bogaerts gets a double. Then they make the pitching change with 2 outs. Brosman gives up a base hit to Cronenworth. That's the play where, excuse me, that actually didn't tie the game. Excuse me, that made it a 5-4 game, but still that would have ended the inning with 2 outs and it would have been 5-3 Mets going into the sixth. But instead, it was 5-4. Bryce Johnson gets an RBI hit to tie the game, and Elias Diaz, who was batting a buck 90 coming into the series, who had a couple of big hits in this series, gives the Padres the lead with a base hit. Brosman also had a wild pitch, so Brazoban really struggles in this one. He makes the mistake, not getting to first base in time, and because of that, after the game was over, he got sent down to the minor leagues. They wanted to get some pitches in, get some innings, and so hopefully for the Mets, Oscar Brosman can figure things out because he has been very wildly inconsistent after he had such a good start for the first 2 months of the season. And the game remained that so Brosman got sent down, and the game remained that way for the next 3 innings, 6-5. And the Mets struggle with again. They struggle with scoring runners in scoring position. They were 1 for 7 on this game with runners in scoring position, and then Ronnie Mauricio hits a game tying home run with 2 outs and nobody on against Robert Suarez. He gets a game tying homer. So a great big hit for the kid, a great big hit for Mauricio, who continues to really come again. Mauricio, I wouldn't say he's been great per se, but he's really come through with some big hits, and he's been pretty good. And I'm glad the Mets didn't trade him. I know Mauricio. We'll get to the trade deadline, the Mets activity. We'll get to it, but I'm glad the Mets didn't trade him. I know it was him and Vientos, another guy, with another guy, Vientos, who had a very good series, and I thought and had a great game here. He should have had 2 home runs, but Fernando Tatis robbed him of a 2-run homer in this one. But Mauricio is another guy that I would not have traded, and I'm glad the Mets didn't trade him. And same thing with Mark Vientos. I'm glad they didn't trade him. So, but he comes through with a game-tying home run. But in the bottom of the ninth, Gregory Soto comes in to pitch. Edwin Diaz is unavailable because he had pitched the previous 2 games against the San Francisco Giants. He makes a key error. It was a bunt. It was a bunt by, I believe it was a Jose Iglesias. Soto had a double play right there, and he overthrows Beatty, gets him off the bag, and it's first and second. Soto, so he makes a key. That's the second reliever to make a big key mistake. Again, fundamentals not there in this game for the Mets in terms of Brazoban and Soto with their relief pitching, and both of them ended up hurting the Mets in this one. Soto does get 2 outs. He's 1 strike away from getting out of it, going to the top of the 10th, but he gives up a fastball because again, he throws hard, he throws fastballs, throws a fastball right down the middle, and Elias Diaz gets a game-winning base hit to win the game for the Padres. And kind of similar to the Rays series, the Mets blow the game 1 of the series and then kind of get blown out the rest of the way in the rest of the series. Sean Manaea pitched in game 2 of the series on Tuesday. The Mets ended up losing this game 7-1. Sean Manaea pitched in this game 5 innings, 3 hits, 4 strikeouts. Jose Butto comes in. He really struggled. And this would be Jose Butto's last game as a New York Met. He goes in 2/3, really struggles, 5 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 walks. Devency comes in, and that was pretty much it. The Mets go 0 for 6 runners in scoring position, and they lose 7-1 in this game. Wednesday's game, the Mets get shut out 5-0. Yu Darvish, who came into this game with a 9 ERA and 4 starts, he looks like vintage Yu Darvish, and the Mets get shut out 5-0. He goes 7 shutout innings, 7 strikeouts. He was great. Clay Holmes really struggles in this one. He goes 3 2/3 as the Mets get shut out 5-0. Again, we'll see with Clay Holmes again. Once again, he struggles. He struggled with command in this game. Struggled arm side. Was very wild at times, and his struggles unfortunately have continued as a starting pitcher. Now the Mets will continue. It looks like they will continue with him being a starting pitcher. I don't know about that. I don't know how long the Mets could do it. I don't know how long the Mets can have him be a starter at this point, because it just seems like the innings and the workload of him being a starter started to catch up to him. I would personally move him to the bullpen. The Mets were not able to get a starting pitcher in this trade deadline. But then again, the trade deadline was really not one for starting pitching. Merrill Kelly did get traded to the Texas Rangers, but Dylan Cease didn't get traded. Nestor Cortez was dealt to the Padres, but was traded to the Padres. But aside from that, there really wasn't much activity in terms of the starting pitching department. Mitch Keller was kept. Sandy Alcantara was kept. Dylan Cease was kept. So there wasn't, and Severino was kept. And I know why, because it wasn't a very strong market for starting pitchers. Like all these guys weren't really having particularly good years. So it was tough. What was really heavy was bullpen. A lot of teams was going for relievers, and a lot of teams going for bullpens. And the Mets, of course, were one of them. But the Mets get shut out 5-0 in this game as they get swept by the San Diego Padres. But during the game, and here we go, we head to the trade deadline. During the game, it was reported and announced that the Mets had made a trade for Tyler Rogers, the submarine reliever. Tyler Rogers was acquired by the Mets in the middle of the game from the San Francisco Giants. Part of the deal was Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert was in the trade, and Jose Butto was in the deal. So Jose Butto, who's been a Met for a while, been a Met for his whole career, he gets dealt in the middle of the game to the San Francisco Giants, Drew Gilbert, who the Mets acquired 2 years ago in the Max Scherzer trade. I believe, yeah, it was Max Scherzer. Yeah, it was the Max Scherzer trade. No, I'm sorry. It was the Justin Verlander trade. I'm sorry. I apologize. Acuna was the Scherzer trade, but in the Justin Verlander trade, Drew Gilbert was acquired by the Mets. There were high expectations for him when he was dealt to the Mets, but injuries and inconsistencies unfortunately hurt him during his minor league stints over the last 2 years. And the Mets, and again, I said before, and this included Drew Gilbert, but some of these guys that they were rumored to that the Mets were looking at trading, these are not David Stearns guys. These were a different regime. David Stearns did not trade for Drew Gilbert. Billy Epler did. So, and now you have Jeff Williams who's playing well in center field. Carson Bench, who has really done well. He was a draft pick from David Stearns. So, and he might be a center fielder. They like him a lot. So, and he's in Double A doing well. So that makes Drew Gilbert a guy you can use as a trade chip. And the Mets used him for Tyler Rogers. And Tyler Rogers is one of the better relief pitchers in the game. Submariner. His ERA, so far this season, Tyler Rogers. Let me just pop it up. The Tyler Rogers also has really good numbers against contending teams like the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Phillies, and that's a common theme here when it comes to Tyler Rogers and the next guy that the Mets acquired in the bullpen later on in the day after the game was over. But both these guys have done really well this season against contending teams like the Cubs, the Phillies, and the Dodgers. Tyler Rogers this season so far with the Giants, 1.6 WAR, 4-3 with a 1.80 ERA, a WHIP, a a whip of let's see, a whip of 0.860, ERA plus of 216. So he's having a fantastic year, and he now adds more to the bullpen for the Mets into those seventh innings. And again, seventh and eighth innings, and the Mets weren't done. Like I said, after the game was over, the Mets acquired Ryan Helsley for the St. Louis Cardinals, just a fast throwing fastball pitcher, hard slider, and he comes to the Mets. And now the Mets, after getting swept by the San Diego Padres, go out and get two key relievers to shore up this bullpen. And you already got Gregory Soto a few days before. So now your bullpen, which was in a mix and match over the last really month, without AJ Minter and with no AJ Minter, Danny Young hurt, inconsistencies with Brazaban and Budo. Stanek had been inconsistent at times this year, and you've been mixing and matching with guys like Brandon Waddell and Davinsky and Richard Lovelady. You now have shorted up. You've got Brooks Raley. Raley is now up. You acquired Gregory Soto. You acquired Ryan Helsley, and you acquired Tyler Rogers. Now your bullpen is really short up and looks like we'll have to see. It looks like one of the better bullpens in all baseball. And again, this was the common theme around Major League Baseball in the trade deadline. Teams shoring up their relievers. Teams were shoring up their bullpens. The San Diego Padres, AJ Preller, he did it again. He went and got Mason Miller. The New York Yankees, they went and got David Bednar. The Philadelphia Phillies, a few weeks before, went and signed David Robertson. So and then I believe yesterday they went and got Duran Duran. So again, contending teams shoring up their bullpens because the starting pitching market was A, not particularly the best, and also B, your starting pitchers in the playoffs anyway. Nowadays in baseball, they go about 4 or 5 innings anyway, and the bullpen takes care of the rest. So you have to shore up your bullpen, and the Mets with Edwin Diaz, and I've said it before, I keep saying it, all the Mets have to do is get to the ninth inning. So get to the ninth inning, get the ball in Edwin Diaz's hands. That's all the Mets really have to do. So now you have Rogers and Helsley who can shore up those seventh, eighth innings along with Diaz in the ninth, and you move Garrett to those fifth, sixth innings, Stanek into those fifth, sixth, or seventh innings. Soto and Raley could come in against lefties, and they've been very good. Raley's been very good all year long. Soto had a good debut. Soto struggled a bit against the Padres, although even then he was an error and one strike away from still getting out of it. But he pitched well his first game with the Mets. He's a hard throwing guy who can get lefties out. Raley has been pretty good so far since coming back from the injury. Also Rico Garcia, who's been pretty good for the Mets since they got him. So you add all that up, and all of a sudden, and you add all that up, and this bullpen, which has been a carousel for a month and has been in flux for a month is now looks pretty good as the Mets enter their first game of August and truly the beginning of the stretch run on Friday tomorrow. So it's interesting. Now the Mets bullpen looks a lot different, and that's good. That's a good thing. The Mets need a bullpen like this, especially if your starters are going to continue to go about 5 or 6 innings. So good. So I think this is I think adding these two guys, Rogers and Helsley, big adds for the Mets, big gets for the Mets in those trades, in those acquisitions. In the Helsley trade, they gave up Jesus Baez. Really, I think really it seems like around baseball, the massive opinion is that Baez is the guy that the Mets top prospect. That was the big one that they gave up and they had to acquire for this one was for Ryan Helsley, of course. Um, Drew Gilbert, obviously, again, like I said, he's kind of been consistent the last 2 years. So again, not many people probably saw him as a bigger prospect. But again, not to say he can't be a great player. I personally think he can. I like Gilbert a lot coming out when the Mets got him. But but again, Ryan Helsley comes to the Mets. He gets traded for Jesus Baez, Nate Dome, and Frank Elisott. So Helsley and Rogers are added to the Mets bullpen that already has Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, Brooks Raley, Gregory Soto, and Rico Garcia. But now that left the other thing. Heading into the trade deadline on Thursday, they needed a bat. They needed a starting and more exclusively, they needed a starting center fielder. You know, they needed a starting center fielder. So Luis Robert was the big one for it seemed like for a lot of people. That was the one they were, and for the Mets, it was definitely the guy they were most interested in. They wanted Luis Robert, but Luis Robert does not get traded at all. Luis Robert did not get traded at the deadline. Seems like the White Sox asking price for Robert was a little too high. And you know what? Yeah, I like Robert. I don't love him. I personally wanted the guy that the Mets ended up getting, Cedric Mullins. I love this. I love getting. I personally think he's more versatile and more athletic and more of a good performer per se than Luis Robert is. And the Mets, this was the guy I wanted the Mets to get to shore up their center field position, and they got him. Cedric Mullins was acquired by the Mets uh, from the Baltimore Orioles. I'll look at the full trade here. Cedric Mullins was acquired for uh, Ramon Gomez, Chandler Marsh, and Anthony Nunez. They go to Baltimore. All three pitchers, all three of them pitchers. They go to Baltimore in the trade. I think this is such a good get for the Mets. Again, I've been a big Cedric Mullins fan for years. When with him as a Baltimore Oriole, this was the guy I felt the Mets had to get. I know everyone wanted Luis Robert. I would have liked Luis Robert, but if the asking price was really high for Luis Robert, I would not have made those trades. I would not have made that trade for Robert. So I like Robert. I didn't love him. I love Cedric Mullins. So he's versatile, plays a good defense. I know it's funny with Mullins. I know the metrics don't say he's a good defender, but when you really watch him on defense, he's very good. Just watch him the last couple of games in Baltimore. He's very good. He's a very good defender. He may not have the best arm, but I mean, aside from Juan Soto, there's really no other outfielder that has a good arm. Nimmo has an okay arm. Tyrone Taylor had an okay arm. So, but Mullins is a very good defender, and he's a good bat. He's got 15 homers this year. I know the batting average isn't pretty, but he's got 15 home runs. You can place him anywhere in the batting lineup. You can place him anywhere in the order, from the top spot to the middle spot to the back to the bottom of the spot. You can place him anywhere in the order. He's got power. He's played in big games with the Orioles, obviously in the postseason when they with them having good teams. He's got more experience than Luis Robert has. Luis Robert's only been in the playoffs once or twice. Cedric Mullins been in the playoffs a couple of times already with the Orioles. Good hitter, got power, has hit well against lefties overall this season. He's played very well as of late. You know, and I think you bring him down to New York, he can steal bases, good base runner. I know he's older than Robert, but I know he's older than Robert, but I think Mullins is just the better overall player, at least in my opinion. I just think he was the better all around player. And the Mets, I felt made a good decision when it looked like that they weren't going to get Roberts for them to pivot and say, okay, let's go get Cedric Mullins. Meanwhile, the Phillies went pivot. Hey, the Phillies, and that was the reports coming into the day. It was the Mets and the Phillies going for Luis Robert. And the Phillies pivoted, went and got Harrison Bader, the former Met. So they went and got Harrison Bader. The Mets pivoted and they went and got Cedric Mullins. So and the White Sox didn't trade Roberts at all. Luis Robert stays with the White Sox. So at least for the rest of the season. But I think Mullins was the better overall player. And I think this was a good get for them. And now you have a bona fide starting center fielder. Now your lineup again looks a little bit different. Now I think I don't know if any addition on offense is gonna fix this offense. I think this offense and their problems around scoring position, I just think it's coaching. I think it's coaching. I think it's their approach to the plate. I think it's their strategy going. I think it's coaching when it comes to their offensive struggles. But they needed to add a bat. They did. They needed to add at least a starting center fielder, if not a second baseman, and then move McNeil to center. And and they did with Cedric Mullins. So now Mullins is starting center fielder. You can put McNeil at second base. You can have Vientos and Beatty. You know, you can have Vientos and Beatty rotate at third base, or Beatty plays third, Mauricio plays third, and Vientos can be your DH, or and he can split rest with Starling Marte. So it adds more versatility to the offense. Now it's up to them to perform. They got to score runs. And look, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, and Lindor have all gotten off the slow starts to begin the second half. Starting tomorrow, Friday, they need to all start playing like stars. You know, this whole lineup needs to. And again, I do think right now it's coaching with this offense, but there's clearly not going to be any coaching changes because we're about to enter August 1st. So there's clearly not going to be any coaching changes. So it's all on the offense. It's all on the players. It's all on the stars, Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, Alonso, to play like stars. And hopefully Vientos continues his recent hot streak. Hopefully Alvarez continues to play the way he's playing right now. Hopefully Mullins can add what the Mets have been missing at starting center field. And Tyrone Taylor can you can now Tyrone Taylor. The good thing for Tyrone Taylor is that he can go back to what he's best at, be a fourth outfielder. Go in and he can place not just center field, but left field and right field. Hey, maybe if Soto needs a DH day, you can put Tyrone Taylor at right field, something like that, right? So, you know, you know, so 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 you now add more now. Marte can be a DH, can still be a DH, and you can put Beatty at third and second. Mauricio, hopefully he continues to hit the way he's been hitting lately. Hopefully Beatty can start kind of getting around it. He's been struggling as of late, but it's gonna fall. To me, it falls on this Mets offense. I think they're gonna determine how the season plays out, especially those top four guys, especially Nimmo, Lindor, Soto, Alonso. All four of them got to start hitting. Now Soto uh, has been able to still get some big hits along the way. He got the big go-ahead home run on Sunday. He had the big game-tying base hit against the Angels the other day. But again, he's off to a slow start to begin the second half, and obviously he's also a bit banged up right now. He suffered a foot contusion after a foul ball hit off his foot at the end of Tuesday night's game, and he missed Wednesday afternoon's game. So hopefully they're expecting him, or at least hoping he'll be back in the lineup tomorrow night. I would expect he is back in the lineup tomorrow night on Friday night against the San Francisco Giants. But all four of those guys, they're the stars. Stars got to be stars. They got to play better and they got to hit better. And Cedric Mullins hopefully can add to this offense and give them some pop in the bottom of the order, along with Alvarez and Vientos and those guys. So I think this is a good addition from the Mets to get Mullins. And I think the Mets overall came out pretty good in this trade deadline. Again, I won't say winners. I won't say, oh, it was the best thing. I already saw, I was watching LB Network all day and they're like, oh, I think it was Greg Amsinger who was like, oh, the Mets have had the best trade deadline or whatever. They won the trade. Again, I won't say anything about, about the results and how the Mets made out here until we see it, you know, until we see it, especially come October. So I won't, so can't really make any determinations yet, but I do think the Mets on paper, that's the better term, you know, So that's the better term. On paper, you know, we'll see how it looks like they did well, but we'll see. We'll see when they take the field on Friday. But Cedric Mullins, Ryan Helsley, and Tyler Rogers are all New York Mets. I think this was, I do think David Stearns made out well here. Of course, they didn't get a starting pitcher, and they didn't get a starting pitcher. And David Stearns talked about it earlier in his press conference at the end of the trade deadline. When the trade deadline passed, he had a press conference at 6:30. David Stearns, and it was interesting. Stearns brought up, I think, and Stearns essentially brought up the possibility of bringing up Sproat and or Nolan McLean. He said, "Here we have confidence not only in the starters who are here, we are also pleased with the development of how some of the guys in AAA are progressing. We understand that they could, may not definitely, but they could be part of the mix going forward if needed." That tells me they expect one of those two guys to be up. So I think for now, we mentioned Clay Holmes. I think for now, Clay Holmes is still a starter, but if he goes, but boy, his next outing I think is going to be big because if his next outing or two is still the same and he's really struggling, Mets are going to have to call up Sproat or McLean. Brandon Sproat actually pitched today uh, for AAA Syracuse. He threw 5 shutout innings for AAA Syracuse tonight on Thursday night. So he threw 5 shutout innings. I just think the Mets are gonna have to call up one of them if they want to at least solidify the rotation and see what these guys can do. Because look, the experiment with Clay Holmes, it started off well. It was good for the first couple of months, but it's clear that it's clear that it's the innings are taking its toll on him. So yeah, Sproul went 5 innings, 9 strikeouts on 95 pitches in his outing for Syracuse tonight for the Syracuse Mets die in AAA. But it's clear for Holmes that it seems to be catching up to him a bit. And look, I think the Mets figured when they signed him that, and clearly they did, that this could happen because they said they would send him back to the bullpen if it wasn't working. But I think because of his early success, they want to see if he can get a little bit better. And I do think they probably prefer not to have Sproat or McLean pitch in the major leagues this season. But if you have to, you have to. So we'll see. But I think the next start or two for Clay Holmes is going to determine whether McLean or Sproat see the big leagues. If Holmes continues to struggle in his next outing or so, I think you could see McLean or Sproat. So I think David Stearns definitely definitely has that in his mind, or definitely thinks that's going to happen, and definitely has that as a plan. I think Stearns has that as a plan to have those two guys or one of them come up and pitch, or maybe both. Maybe one goes to the bullpen. I don't know, but I would personally, because they didn't get a starting pitcher, and the Mets tried. The Mets apparently were in on Merrill Kelly in before he got traded to the Texas Rangers. They were apparently in on Merrill Kelly. I'm sure they're also in on a lot of other stars. They checked in on the Marlins with Cabrera. I think they also checked in the Marlins with Alcantara, with Sandy Alcantara. But so the Mets tried to get a starter, but again, this was a tough starter market, considering that pretty much most of them were struggling, if not all of them. So it was going to be a tough get. And that's why the Mets pivoted, I think, to just go get bullpen arms. And they got Helsley and Rogers. They got Soto a few days ago. So they just pivoted to go get bullpen, help out the bullpen, shore up the bullpen, and go get your outfielder, go get your bat. And they did. So we'll see how they do. But we'll see how these trades and how this team goes forward starting on Friday night against the San Francisco Giants. The Mets begin a 3-game series against the Giants on Friday night. Certainly a big series for the Mets here because you really got to come out and play well because it's Friday, it's August 1st. It's the stretch run now. It's the last 2 months of the season, and you're just coming off getting swept by the Padres. And I said after that Giants series, when they swept the Giants, said just give me one against San Diego. And game one was the game they should have gotten, but they let that one get away. Robbie Ray will pitch for the Giants on Friday night, 7 o'clock. David Peterson will take them out for the Mets. And then Saturday, Kodai Senga will pitch. Pretty big start for Senga. You'd like to see him, give you a decent outing after he was struggling the last two outings. So you like to see Kodai Senga go out there and give you a good outing. This will be interesting because again, the Giants. I mean, this will be interesting with the Giants because they were kind of sellers in during this. They trade obviously they traded Tyler Rogers. They actually traded Mike Yastrzemski today, but they don't have any pitchers lined up for tomorrow or Sunday. As Senga pitches for the Mets and Frankie Montez on Saturday, and Frankie Montez will pitch for the Mets on Sunday. So that's your preview for this weekend for the Mets as they face the Giants at home before they play the Cleveland Guardians Monday through Wednesday next week. And then after that, next weekend they play the Milwaukee Brewers in Milwaukee. So that'll be a tough, interesting series. So before they get to that Brewers series, the Mets better, you better win these games against the Giants and the Guardians, two teams that, you know, 500. We're kind of leaning towards selling, buying, not really sure what they want to do. The Giants kind of sold. The Guardians, I think we're going to trade Emmanuel Clase, but then he got suspended. They didn't trade Stephen Quam. So, interesting what the Guardians did in the trade deadline. So, but you got but we'll get to that series. We'll get to that series on Monday. But overall, these are two series for the Mets that you really got to go out and win. And I posted on Twitter before. I posted on Twitter after they got swept by the Padres. It's time for the Mets to start playing their best baseball. Here we go. It's August 1st now. It's August 1st. August, September now. And you got two big series with the Phillies coming up, and the Phillies improved their team. They got Bader, they got Duran. So they improved as well. So, and you got two big series against them coming up in August, and then another at Citi Field, and then another one in September in Philadelphia. So here we go. And like I said, these not only do these guys that they acquired have to play well, but also your starting pitching has to give you some length. Your bullpen has to continue to pitch well, and your offense has to hit. These guys have finally got to start hitting consistently, not just one guy hits and another guy hits, or two guys hit, two guys. No, consistently. 1 through 9, every single one of them, and especially the top four, the stars. Soto's got to break out of his full slump. Lonzo really has to break out of his slump. Lindor really has to break out of his slump. And Brandon Nimmo has to start hitting better. All four of these guys need to carry this team. And this team needs to start playing the baseball that they're capable of playing in. Aside from the 7-game winning streak, and aside from series wins against the Yankees, the Brewers, and the Royals, this team has not played good baseball at all through these last 2 months. Really since mid-June, early June, June 13th, 14th. Since then, the Mets have not played good baseball at all. They have been overall not very good. So this team, and boy, to follow up the Giants sweep with us getting swept by the Padres, that is not ideal. So this team, starting tomorrow night, on Friday, they have got to play better baseball. They have absolutely got to start playing better baseball. They've got to. If you want to win this division, heck, if you just want to go out to the playoffs and get hot and make a run, you got to start playing better baseball. You got to start playing better baseball. So here we go. They made their moves. They've hopefully improved the team. And now we're going to see how this team plays out. Starting on Friday night. We're going to see how things play out for the Mets. So here we go. Here we go. It's time to see this team start to play the baseball and play the way I think they're capable of playing it. They're a half game up first place still because the Phillies lost 2 out of 3 to the White Sox this past week. But the time is now for the Mets to start playing their best baseball. And it starts with Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, and Lindor. It starts with those 4 guys. Starts with those 4. They have to carry this team. Stars got to play like stars. They got to carry this team. It starts with the starters starting to get a little more length. And it starts with that bullpen that's now got a lot of hype in it now. There's a lot of hype now in this bullpen now. They got to kind of pitch well and, live up to the hype. And hopefully Cedric Mullins gives them what they need at center field. I think he can because I'm a big Cedric Mullins fan, but hopefully he can. Hopefully he can. So, but hopefully he gives them what the Mets need at center field. So overall, overall, this is what the Mets have to do. This is what the Mets have to look forward to, and it should be a very interesting stretch run throughout these next 2 months. And we'll see where this team is. So, and they got a big division race with the Phillies, and it. I guess we can say, yeah, it's Mets Phillies now. I didn't count out the Braves, but I'm starting to kind of look at the Braves and be like, okay, all right. It doesn't seem like they're gonna get their season jump started. So the Braves didn't do anything at all at the trade deadline. As far as I know, I don't think they did anything at all at the trade deadline. So it's gonna be the Mets and the Phillies. Looks like it. Uh, don't count out the Marlins though to be pesky. The Marlins have been very pesky. They've played very good baseball. If they play the Mets and or Phillies, they're going to look to play spoiler. So, and I'm sure a lot of Met fans, I'm sure a lot of Met fans already see 2007, 2008 when I say that, but that's just the Marlins, right? So the Marlins will be pesky, I think, throughout this stretch, throughout these next 2 months, and they could certainly, even though they might not win this division, the Marlins, they'll still play a factor in the National League East, and I'm sure the Braves will too. I'm sure the Braves will too because they're going to look at the Mets and the Phillies and go, okay, well, may not be our year, but we can still play our best against the Mets and the Phillies and affect their season. So we'll see. So we'll see. But that's the Mets this week. That's the Mets this week, both on the field and off the field. Again, not much to write home about on the field, but a lot to write about off the field with their acquisitions, and hopefully they made the team better. We'll find out. We'll see if the team is better starting tomorrow night. But that will be it for today on MazzaOnMets, New York Mets trade deadline edition. Uh, the Mets acquired again. The Mets acquired Tyler Rogers, Ryan Helsley, and Cedric Mullins as they enter the next 2 months of the season into this stretch run for the National League East. They race for the playoffs, race for the division title. Should be a lot. Should be interesting. Should be a lot of fun. But that's what I'll do it today for MazzaOnMets. I will see you guys on Monday for MazzaOnMets. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Thank you guys very much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. Give this video a like, share, and subscribe. I will see you guys on Monday for more MazzaOnMets as we recap the series with the Giants and preview the series with the Guardians, and hopefully we'll see how some of the new additions did in their first weekend in Queens. So have yourselves a great night. Have yourselves a great night. Have yourselves a good day. And let's go Mets.